All right. Hello, everyone. I'm here with Sharon Beverly-Nielsen. How are you?
Hi, good morning.
Yeah, let's just dive into it. So, could you give us a little bit of a background and of your life? Can you give us your life story?
Sure, in like 30 seconds. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad to be here. I'm very excited. So thank you for having me. So I'm a registered nurse in Australia. Have been for many, many years, but I now have my own holistic women's wellness business that has sort of become the passion of my life, where I just believe that life is very complicated. You know, people's nervous systems are overstretched, and I think that sometimes the simplicity of life has got lost. So my whole mission now is really just to support women in particular, sorry boys, about the fact, and probably, you know, like it's really just about having a conversation and having the direction around your wellness in general. And I think that when you look at life in particular and you look at your lifespan, we are living longer. We want to be more active. We want to be more interactive. And I think if you can take some of that power back and take control of your life and how you want to live it, then I'm there. I'm your person, if that makes sense. So, yeah.
And what are some first steps people can take to take back control of their life? They're feeling lost.
Yes. So the big thing I feel like, which relates to you guys very much, is about the environment. So going outside, I think the sun is huge. It is. And I think that, you know, I don't even think it has to be sunlight. It can be the rain. It can be just, I think, coming out of a building where, like we were talking about earlier, about the fluorescent lights, the artificial air conditioning. I think looking at our screens, that blue light has a major impact on our hormonal balance within our mind. And there is so much research coming out now sort of suggesting that these aren't good for us long term. And even though they are, it's a system where we sit in, I guess, because that's where we go to work to make our money. We have to, as the individual, then start to become proactive as to, well, if I have to go for 8 hours into a building, like I work in a hospital, so, and it's not the cleanest place, as you would imagine, in the world, but I really notice it when I leave work at the end of the day. I become really conscious of just appreciating whatever the environment is doing at the end of the day, taking those few moments of breathing some deep breaths so that I'm changing what I'm, you know, I suppose ventilating my lungs with. And then and it's amazing how my mental shift now, because you can be sitting at your desk at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and be going, oh my God, I'm so tired. There is no way I'm going to the gym. Or maybe I'll pick up a bottle of wine on the way home because I just feel terrible. If you actually then go and then choose not to engage with those thoughts, but then actually when you finish work at the end of the day, go for a bit of a walk, you would probably find that you feel better. And so even within that 5 or 10 minutes of walking, you probably want to walk further. And then probably by the end of the walk, you actually don't feel like you need your bottle of wine because you actually feel better and you're happy to come home, have a glass of water and cook dinner. So I just think it's just those little tweaks that we fill our minds with so much thought process, and we're trying to make decisions while we're trying to work at the same time. And I don't think that that's very good for us. And, you know, the next step to that is really in relation to your nervous system. So where is your nervous system sitting? How is it reacting to the work environment that you're in? And if you know that you've had a day where you've been heightened because of either meetings or interactions, or you're just not enjoying where you are, then again, those few moments outside allows you to reset. And then what you've got to then start to do, I think, longer term is, if you think it's the environment that you're working in and it's no longer suitable for you, you've actually got to start to kind of be able to reconnect to yourself as to what's your next step, because you can't stay there then. You know, it just doesn't make sense. So And I think the problem is people's nervous system become wired because they've then got a mortgage or a bill to pay, and then they're like, I can't move, I don't have enough energy, now I've got to apply for a job. And it's kind of like if you actually gave yourself that space and went and sat in the park, even if you did it, you know, on a Saturday morning, go for a walk, sat in the park, listen to a podcast, have a coffee, you know, those sort of things. It just gives you that distance away from the thoughts you've had during the day or the week to allow something that's maybe really important for you or what your body's trying to tell you to come up through that space. So, yeah, I could talk for days.
Talking about a little bit earlier about how you make things like that you're already ingesting just a bit healthier or improve upon habits you already have. What are some easy kind of pro tips?
I think the big thing is always to think about what you're putting into your body. I think that's a really important thing. So I think that and I'm just as guilty as everybody else. So I'm not standing there saying I'm like a size 0 supermodel and that this is what you should do. I very much know as a mum and continuing to work that we will just eat often for the sake of eating rather than because we should be eating, if that makes sense. And so it's actually then trying to think about, so yeah, we were talking about our coffee and putting some protein powder. So that's a big, you know, thing that's going on at the moment, and collagen. And I kind of for myself have noticed like I need my coffee in the morning, but because of rounds and meetings and things like that we do with the doctors, I often start work quite early. And so by the time all those rounds have finished and everything, it's sort of 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, and I probably haven't eaten something properly. So a lot of the evidence will talk about if you have coffee direct onto your body first thing in the morning, particularly for women, it can be harmful for your nervous system in the long run, and particularly those that go through perimenopause, because it accelerates those stress hormones. So your cortisol, which naturally rises in the morning because that's how we wake up, actually then escalates further because we're having caffeine. But if we had, and so that's where I kind of went, oh, you know, and then there's a really good doctor that I actually follow, Dr. Stacey Sims, which I don't know if you guys have heard about her. So she's kind of like an exercise physiologist, but she's also been a professional athlete. And so she's very much aware of the training modalities and food and everything, and how much a lot of research has been very much based on males rather than females, and that our bodies are different. And so the protein powder for me became a source of, I need more protein in my diet as a female, that we need this for our recovery and our nervous system and our body to function properly, rather than like getting those quick eats that we do because we're hungry and we're in the middle of everything. So the idea is that the protein will keep you full for longer and is better for your system. So then I started to sort of think about, oh, well, if I put some protein powder in my coffee in the morning, what does that do for me? So then I started to do a bit of research around, you know, obviously a lot of protein powders can have a lot of sugar in them, which you don't want to have. So you've got to then really look at your ingredients and look at, you know, we should only be having like 5 or 6 grams of sugar a day, which is essentially kind of about 2 or 3 teaspoons of sugar. But if you then actually just looked at processed food and what it was in, you'd be quite surprised at how much is already in there before you even add any active sugar. So that's where I kind of started to sort of go, okay, well, if we start to say you want to have a coffee, let's not make coffee a bad place, but let's look at it proactively to say, how do we make that as a bonus for you? So we give you some extra ingredients that are not going to harm your body in the long term if you start to do this as a habit. And I love my coffee. My coffee has always become my sanctuary, I suppose. So it's kind of one of those things I wasn't prepared to give up myself personally. And so that's where I think I've managed to look at, what is my protein powder? How much do I put into it? And, you add it and you stir it all up, and then you add your hot water, and then you keep mixing it, kind of thing. And it's good. It keeps me full for a couple of hours now. And I find my concentration is so much better too, because I'm not sort of running on empty, but with my caffeine running around my head. So, that nervous twitch that sometimes you can get I was starting to get that even first thing in the morning with the coffee. So that's when whereas now I know it's like I'm feeding my nervous system, and then it's kind of like, yeah, okay, you've got this. And then I probably eat my lunch at like 10 a.m. But I'm hungry then. And then I find I don't need to eat for the rest of the day until I'm probably like 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then I have my dinner. I sound like a nana, but I'm actually eating the way my body wants to. And I'm trying not to overeat. Pardon? No, well, so this is what my breakfast becomes, is the protein powder in my coffee. So it's kind of like stepping away from that thinking of I've got to eat 3 meals a day. A lot of the research is now sort of saying, particularly for women, we have our hormone cycles, which, at different times of your month, you'll be hungrier or you won't be, or you'll be more fatigued. And it's kind of like, okay, so when you're hungrier, instead of actually penalizing yourself because you're hungry, or doing that, I can't eat this because it's bad for me, what you're trying to do is then make good, you're supposed to eat, but eating well. So you eat your protein, and then you eat your complex carbs as well. And then if you still want a bit of sugar, you're having that sugar on top of a full stomach, I suppose, after a meal, rather than straight on your stomach. And so therefore that means that your sugar spike's not so high, and it doesn't affect your.
Yeah, I noticed that, like, some days I wake up and I'm really hungry, and then other days I wake up and I don't want, like, the idea of eating just grosses me out.
Yes. And so if you actually
thing,
well, I think it's to do with your hormone. It's to do with your stress levels and your nervous system. So, rather than feeling like you have to eat something, it's kind of like eat when you want to eat, right? Because that's when you're hungry. That's when your body is telling you you should eat. But then when you are eating, just make sure that, you start with a good protein, and then you put your complex carbs. And that's where there's a lot of conversation around, we've been conditioned as a society for marketing reasons around the processed food industry. And, our breakfast cereals are laden with sugar, and so what happens is you have that in the morning because you've been marketed to say that's what you need to eat in the morning. And, like our forefathers who ran around the planet, eating and hunting and gathering, never ate cereal. They ate when they felt like it or when they needed to. And then they might go through a period of fasting because they were out walking or they were doing whatever they were doing. So we've only become industrialized because society has become industrialized. And that's part of the very simple conversation of, well, what do I do when I'm not hungry? And it's kind of like, okay, so you just keep drinking water, or you drink, as soon as you have milk though, or you have protein powder, that's considered you eating. So for your body, how with fasting, they talk about you fast and you're supposed to have like clear fluids, and so essentially your body will respond to anything you put in your mouth is considered to be eating. And so your body will respond and rise its sugar and do all that sort of thing, or its insulin, to eat that. So part of what we're trying to do now is to say to people, well, if you're going to eat something because you're hungry, eat something that doesn't spike your sugar straight away, because then you're not shooting all your insulin and then you're not crashing within the next 2 hours to eat again. And so you should have your good little healthy snacks, so that days when you are hungry later, then that you can eat those when you're actually hungry, because your body's ready to consume that food.
I was listening to a different podcast about how the research of caloric restriction is actually linked to longevity.
Yes. Yes.
What are the caveats of that?
So Dr. Stacey Sims talks a lot about fasting and how that, particularly for women who are hitting into that, the mid-30s, sort of early 40s period, where they're starting to maybe develop some subtle signs of perimenopause, But at the time, you don't know that that's what's happening because life is busy. You've got small children. You're working a full job. You're maintaining a home. You're trying to be social. You've got holidays planned. You know, all of that is not part of it. And often I think we get sold this image of what we should be doing. And so I think for women, our hormones, like our estrogen and progesterone, are our kind of like buffers for our nervous system, right? And as we sort of start to get a bit older, what happens is they start to decline. And so your body's natural ability to manage stress starts to decline, which is why then women start to feel more anxious and they have that, you know, they get the hot, you know, night sweats and all of that sort of thing that happens during the night. And that's just the dysregulation of their hormones. But it's actually a natural transition. Like this isn't anything that's a bad thing because this is just part of what our bodies do. It's just that what happens is we are now trying to put that body, like an ancient sacred temple, so to speak, into a modern day life. And it's like squeezing, you know, a square into a round hole. It just isn't working. And so the fasting, I think, works well for women when they're younger because they've got the resilience in their system, because fasting is still a stress. So if you are actively going through periods, although they do talk about now, certainly for perimenopause, and if women think that they're a risk of like pre-diabetes, there is talk of if you can like eat your last meal of the day earlier in the day, so before you go to bed. So instead of eating late at night, say, and you have dinner at 7 and then you're having, you know, a snack at 9 or whatever, and then you go to bed. If you try and eat like, oh, well, you know, not necessarily like me, like a nana at 4 o'clock. But if you ate, you know, like that's because I'm hungry. So I'm kind of like, I've decided, because I'm always hungry and I used to come home from work and eat with the kids and then I would cook dinner. So now that they're a bit older, what I've just decided to do is I just eat my dinner when I'm hungry. And then what they're now, the research is saying, if you then don't eat later and your window of fasting is longer when you're asleep, then that's better for women.
Speaking about your kids, do you think this benefits kids too, for kids to eat when they're hungry instead of?
Yeah. I would just say experiential. Is that the right word? You know, my kids are always like, they will always, I think they just need to eat when they're hungry. And kids are always hungry and they're growing, you know, like I think the other thing is too, I think, you know, traditionally our society wants us to eat 3 meals a day because that just makes organization easier. And certainly if you've got a natural grazer, like you know, I had a daughter who always likes fruit and she used to just eat fruit, but she would never really sit. She would sit and eat dinner, but she would still be eating all this other stuff. And I used to kind of be like, oh my God, am I just fueling her for something, you know? But she was, you know, she was busy. She loved sport and she played, you know, she ran around and she did all of that sort of thing. And I kind of think the other message that we need to start to train our children is that food is there to sustain us and it can be enjoyable. It's not a punishment. And I think that, you know, we're kind of growing up in this society where people think, oh, I can't eat this. I can't do this. I've got to put myself on a diet. And having been there, done that myself. And as soon as you say, I can't eat something, psychologically, it's going to be the first thing that you want. As soon as you say, I'm going to go alcohol free, or I'm not going to have any sugar, or I'm not going to eat for the next 2 days, right? All those messages are going to go to your brain and tell you.
Why is that?
Well, it's just part of psychology and our brain and a whole other center that works against us. So essentially our mind works against us, but it's also because we get conditioned and that the workforce that we, you know, are in, the life that we're living, all of that kind of thing. See, if we could all just go sit in the park, for instance, and have a really healthy lunch, and you could do that every day, you would have a completely different outlook on life by the end of the week. wouldn't we? We'd all just be like, yeah, life is good. Instead, we're sitting having lunch in front of our laptops or our computers or in amongst meetings and running down the corridors and stuff. So there's a huge amount of work that kind of is being done. But I think that that's where like, even from this conversation, there's so many elements to wellness. And I think it's becoming very confusing because people have so much access to information, but they then don't know how to relate it to themselves. So that's why I created my business. Like, essentially, I kind of went, let me be the tire. You're in the middle and there's all these spokes of wellness that kind of go on, but I want to be your tire. So, if people want to do some coaching or if they want to, like, I've got so many resources and stuff, and I just kind of think it doesn't need to be complicated. And I think life should be fun and we should be thriving. We have so much available to us now, and yet we're seeing an amazing increase in depression, anxiety, mental health. And I think it's because we've all kind of become close to our laptops and our technology, and we're disconnecting from who we really are.
Apparently, ChatGPT is causing psychosis. A lot of good with it, right? Like,
Yes.
there. But what are some of the limitations with our friend Chat?
Oh, bless Chat. I love Chat. Well, I think the thing is that you don't really know. Chat will only give you what you ask. So if you're trying to find out some information about a particular topic, for instance, you have to specifically ask what it is that you're looking for Chat to give you that information. But if you don't know what to ask, then because you don't know what you don't know, then Chat's not going to give you the information. So, and I think that that's part of the reason why people like turn to Instagram, for instance, because then they can, like the hashtags have always kind of worked and things like that. So I think, but the problem is that it's very broad and it doesn't relate to you necessarily. So then people can get lost in what they call this doom scrolling. And then they might try and put something into ChatGPT, but it really, it is circulating within a plethora of information. And I think that you can continue to ask it, to go deeper and to do research for you. But I know, even from my experience and coming from a medical background, I have to get very specific with it. And then when I ask it to do research, it will do the research for me and it will go deeper into what it can find. But even those resources aren't necessarily true medical resources. And so it could still be, you've just got to be careful, because you could still have someone who is putting across their opinion, and that, data can always be kind of manipulated to suit whatever argument you want, really. So I think people just need to be aware that, I think Chat's great. Like, Chat will come up with all sorts of things. If I'm kind of like have an idea and I'm like, what do you think women, over 40 are concerned about? Or what do you think this is the latest issue? And it can go and do a Google search for me, but I've then got to pinpoint something and say, okay, I want you to go deeper. And so I just think that's something for, it's like buyer beware kind of stuff.
And you have some resources yourself, right? So what kind of resources do you offer and where can people find them?
Yeah, so I've got a website, which is www.eternalher.com. So very easy. Because it's about longevity and, women thriving. And at the moment, I've got a really low cost kind of self-guided assessment where there are elements around sort of weight gain, hormonal balance, confidence. And it's just something that you can go through yourself, and it's self-paced. And then sometimes I feel it may help you identify one area that you want to work on. So instead of you kind of feeling like, I need to change my life, I'm not happy and I don't know where to start, this can help channel you into one place where you can start. And then you can always talk to me. I'm very happy for you to have a call with me. And the other thing is I write a blog. So I also have a blog that I do where I will do a combination between, I suppose, more the medical scientific side of things. And then I'll do another one that's a bit more spiritual. which is often reflective of my own life and journey. Like I wrote one yesterday about massage. Is massage spiritual? I went and had a massage on the weekend, and oh my God, it was fantastic. And I was kind of like, I haven't done this for so long. And I kind of thought, oh my God, why are we not doing this? I talk about this all the time. What do you mean? I'm still not doing it. You know, so it's kind of being real and being relatable.
Cool. I'll have to check that out.
Yes, I'd love you to. And I'm
Well-
also, sorry, I was just going to say, Ari, I'm also, the Eternal Her is also on like social media. So if people prefer that on Insta or even on TikTok, I'm trying to play on TikTok and or Facebook. So it's kind of wherever they kind of feel that they would relate to or they're comfortable.
Cool. All right. Well, so nice chatting with you. I learned so much. I'm sure everyone listening did as well.
Yes,
So,
thank you for having me.
of course. All right. Well, have a good rest of your day.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.